I open this tale with the purple scent of jacarandas drifting up the old Prédio en Consolação, the one where the elevator still has a brass gate you have to drag like a stubborn accordion. My name, though nobody uses it much, is Carolina das Neves, 28, orphaned early, and so chatty, I sometimes order bread just so the baker can hear the echo in my chest. That last part surprised me too, because until April, I talked mostly to myself and to the unblinking eye of my blue Sony radio. The samba that brought the sparrow had been trickling from that same radio for years. A cheerful plague of syncopation played too loud on weekday mornings, a substitute for another pair of hands in an apartment made for two. I lived alone because love had kept packing and unpacking itself in my doorway like a traveler with cheap luggage. When the last suitcase thumped down the stairs, I marked the silence by spinning the dial until every station became liquid, then louder until the whole building could tap its feet in its slippers. One Thursday at 7:30, while I was quartering limes for the cachaça I never drank, a dot the color of wet clay darted between the laundry wires, skimming the skylight's broken pane. The first thing I noticed was his courage. He looked at me as if I owed him a song. Second was his name, but that came a heartbeat later. I christened him Torção de Ouro, gold twist, because the ring of sun around his neck split into two bracelets of feathers that caught fire whenever the city's fumes thinned. The next morning I scattered a fistful of cornmeal over the windowsill. Samba records spun in the background. I sang along loudly enough to drown out the ache. Torção landed like a thrown coin. Flip, and stared. When I offered my open palm, he skipped onto it as onto a tilted stage, pecked once, twice, then tipped his beak in what felt precisely like a bow. I laughed. Cornmeal sprayed into my curls. At that moment, I knew the house was no longer its own echo. Every day now has a liturgy. First, the faint click of his two-stick landing on the fire escape railing. Second, the polite cough he gives if I oversleep. Third, the soft coronary flutter when he eats from my hand, keeping tempo with the radio's pandeiros. I acquired the habit of speaking to him, really weaving stories, as if he possessed a fragile Portuguese-to-bird translation inside his tiny brain. I told him about the honeymoon in Bahia that fizzled, the green suitcase still stuck under the bed like a guilty promise. I confessed how I rehearse conversations with ghosts, how I arrange the limes in semicircles because they look like small smiles. Torção never editorialized, only preened and listened, leaving 3 ember feathers on the sill at every departure, as though rent were paid by color. News of him spread. Mrs. Justina on the 6th floor started leaving a shallow saucer of water where the hallway smelled of guava jam. Paulo, the cat-eyed doorman, offered aviary advice he'd copied from a dictionary. Children tramped up the cork stairs after school to chatter sparrow theories through the peephole. All of them believed he was tame. I kept the truth quiet. The sky was still his, the window merely the bar where the barman knew his drink by sight. One night in July, the city coughed up a storm. Rainwater galloped down the gutters like tiny horses fleeing a burning fort. Torção did not come. By 9 p.m., I had produced an excess of anxiety. I set an extra plate of cornmeal and a lit candle like a vigil for someone shipping off to war. Midnight found me on the fire escape barefoot, saxophones of rain blowing into my nightgown. Nothing. At 3:07, a pale scratch. I yanked the sash to reveal him soaked, shivering, left wing angled like a broken violin bow. His eyes still flashed carnival light. I carried him inside in both cupped hands, those same hands that once held someone else's stubbled cheeks, pressed him gently to my chest like a frantic heartbeat. Warmth and hush, samba lowered to a lullaby. By morning the wing had settled, rust-colored again, and he flew once around the living room to demonstrate recovery before perching on top of the turquoise radio, head cocked. I understood. The samba must go on, louder now, because we had a contract negotiated in wind and crumbs and music. What people never noticed is the negotiation went both ways. Somewhere over the jagged skyline, Torção had picked a new skill, greeting other birds with scraps of my tune. Late afternoons, from the laundry lines rose a flickering choir, wrens and swifts tacking lilting off beats onto the master rhythm coming from my window. I felt like a conductor whose orchestra lived in separate trees, yet rehearsed twice a day on invisible telephone wires. Years compress themselves at odd angles in cities like ours, They bend around hunger, around love that arrives feathered instead of fleshed. On the anniversary of the day he first trusted me, I opened a tin of white cornmeal my grandmother swore would last through revolutions. Torson swooped in, deposited the tiniest feather, this one the color of bottled moon, and for the first time perched not on the sill but on my shoulder, the highest note against my collarbone. I whispered my next confession, that the radio had started skipping after 14 years, and I feared the day its scratch outlasted his heartbeat. He pecked my earlobe once. Peck, peck, that sounded uncannily like laughter. I don't know how long friendship lasts in sparrow years. I only know that every dawning cadence begins with the soft knock of claw against iron railing and ends with 3 ember feathers on wood smooth from the passing of so many wings. Come Monday, I will replace the Sony's belt with whatever rubber the repairman offers and reset the needle so Monday itself can enter on the proper beat. Because Torson de Oro returns, and because the samba insists upon the return, the little window on Consolação keeps spilling gold into the city's bruised morning.